Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sport Management Office Hours podcast. I'm Nick Zaroya along with my co-host Brandon Podgorski, and today we welcome Brittany Jacobs from American Public University. Brittany, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick. It's great to be here.
So first of all, Brittany, obviously you work at American Public University, aka APU. Not to get into the alphabet soup here, but why don't you explain for the people that don't know that much about your university? Kind of just give us the a little bit of the elevator pitch of what your university is and what it looks like.
Absolutely. So we're a for-profit institution, which is different than most of the institutions across the country. And definitely getting into the alphabet soup, we go by APUS, which is American Public University System. And within that system, there are actually four institutions, two on one side of the house and then two others that kind of live on their own. On my side of the house is American Public University and American Military University. So students from both American Public University and American Military University are all in the same courses, but they're marketed as two different institutions. They're two different brands. So our APU side, that American Public University side, is catering much more to your traditional students, your 18 to 22-year-olds coming out of high school. The American Military University brand is catering to your folks in the military, dependents, anyone kind of connected to those military branches. And it really is interesting to look at the two different brands. If you have a second, go take a look at those two different brands, and you can see that they're catering towards two completely different clientele based on the way that the marketing is done and the advertising and things like that. We are accredited by HLC, so it is an accredited institution. And then because we are for profit, we are still managed by a board, but we have presidents, vice presidents, all of those kind of levels that you might see on the corporate side of the house.
Okay, and you come from a background where you have worked at traditional campuses, and so how has this kind of transition to this for-profit model been for you personally?
It's been great, to be honest. You don't see much of the difference on a day to day. We do have investor calls and we do have a stock associated with our institution. In some ways, that's kind of interesting because you can see your institutional performance play out in the stock market, which you can't necessarily do at a traditional institution. But otherwise, the day to day is very similar. In our smaller sphere, in that smaller bubble, you still have the hierarchical challenges that you have at a traditional institution. You're still working with department chairs, faculties, deans, provosts. So otherwise, it looks very similar. I would say that kind of the biggest challenge for me is being managed by corporate goals. That's a little bit different than the objectives we might see at a traditional institution. A little bit because those KPIs are really hardcore, because essentially they indicate and will ultimately impact the stock value, right? So it's not just like, oh, push that to the next academic year, it's going to be fine. It's like, no, we're hitting the KPIs this year, and you have to make sure it's done.
That's so interesting because obviously in the environment that we're in, where we're constantly being attacked for what value we bring, you might have the quickest way to prove your value via that stock. And I think it's pretty interesting because there are times where I know Brandon and I working at Slacks, we wonder how are we doing financially, and we either have to hope for an honest conversation at a town hall meeting, or we have to like dig in the 990s 8 months after that they were turned in. So
Right.
it's really hard to know where we are financially unless you just have a lot of clarity on campus, which is difficult to get. So that's very unique. So the day to day for you is pretty much the similar governance structure to what we're all used to. But then, like you said, there are those financial influences that creep in that take
Absolutely.
it to that extra level where it is corporately run. That's super interesting. And when I look at, let's just say, your sport management program for your major,
Sure.
everything looks very, very similar. I mean, that's probably part of your background is it's made to look similar to everywhere else I've ever looked, right?
Yes.
30 gen eds, 36 in the major, you've got your seminar, you've got your internship, and then you've got your electives. So, all adding up to around 120. So it looks very similar to everything else we've done. So as far as, the way that this is all run, so where are you getting, let's say, you're full-time. Are there any other full-time members in your department? Where are these adjuncts coming from, and how do you manage all of that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nick. I am full time in the department. I'm the department chair for both sport management and esport. And then we also have six other full time faculty members on our team. In addition to that, we have about 22 adjuncts that work on our team. So we're rather large. In terms of enrollment, we're at about 585 students. So relatively large, definitely not the biggest program in the country, but one of the bigger programs in the country. And that's great because it allows us to bring in all of these adjuncts that have their expertise all across the board. And we can really leverage folks that are all across the country. We actually have one of our adjuncts that lives on a sailboat outside of Paris right now. So, it's really cool when you're in that online asynchronous setting because you can leverage expertise from everybody all across the globe. It doesn't just have to be the people in your local region.
Yeah, well, don't sell yourself on close to 600 students. Don't sell yourself short because that's really, I mean, we'd all be dying to have that many in most of our situations. Now, what would you say, if you're allowed to share, would be the split between the two universities that you work with in that program? I'm just curious from a marketing perspective how that's played out.
Absolutely. It's about a 75-25 split, with 75 being on that military side.
Mm.
They're one of the biggest providers of educational services to the military in the entire country. So we definitely have a good reputation there. A number of our students have gone through the program and then go back to their respective branches and say, hey, this is a great program. You should get involved. And that word of mouth is honestly our biggest marketing tool within that particular industry.
I want
Okay.
to follow up with
Yeah,
that,
please.
Nick, because that's a really great question because you guys do. I know APU does a really nice job of providing opportunities for military members. But we've all been in sport management a long time. We were all at Cosme. We all understand the importance of experiential learning. Well,
Yes.
doggone, that can be hard if you're a
It is
military
hard.
member.
It is.
And I run an online degree program, and it's hard for my students. Some of them who are actually in the thick of it,
Yes.
working in athletics already. So, I see that they've got the option where they can do an internship or they can do some type of senior seminar. I'm assuming that might be part of the strategy to make sure that they finish and get a little bit of
Absolutely.
that experience. But for those students who just for whatever reason they can't go out and do an internship or volunteer or do class trips, what are some creative ways that you guys have been able to come up with to get them some of that experiential learning that we know is so important?
Yes, one of the biggest things we've been doing recently is micro internships. Instead of that 8 week or that 16-week internship, which is really hard when you have a full-time job or you're deployed in some other country or things like that. These internships allow students to, take that 1 or 2 days that they have free or the weekend or a long weekend and spend that time doing things that you might typically see in an internship. And then we combine a couple of those opportunities into this larger internship, and that's the way that they can really kind of get those hours in and get that in-person experience that they might not otherwise get. So that's what we've been really successful with, and I would say that that's kind of the avenue that we're leading towards at this point. We have a really cool opportunity coming up for some students with Live Golf. So if they're in the region, they can go there. And again, because we are not based in a particular location, it's somewhat challenging to create that network, right? It's not just, okay, well, I have a student who's located in Washington, D.C. Let's hook them up with something in D.C. because, we have 20 different opportunities for them to check out. Um, it also is positive in some ways because we can leverage our international network and say, okay, well, you're in Germany. I happen to know somebody that works for the German Football League. Let's hook you up with them and you can do a micro internship when you have a couple days off. So there are challenges, but there are also some really great pieces about not having a particular location as we kind of leverage our bigger networks.
Yeah, that's something we wrestle with a little bit, but however, and Nick, you might want to close your ears for this one, but I do see there's some advantages, even though I've been in the classroom for a long time, and I love that experiential learning and traveling and networking and all that. It's really really important. But I do see some advantages right now to an online education to sport management, where if I'm a high school senior, I might think about working part time or doing internships with teams as I'm getting my degree
Absolutely.
being flexible online with my time and getting that experience. 4 years I graduate. Hey, I've been working part-time for local, fill in the blank team. That's a great advantage for some of those students.
It really is. It's one of those things where it's like you don't need to take that gap year anymore. You can still go travel all across Europe if that's what you want to do. Backpack. Just make sure every couple days you hit a Wi-Fi hotspot and you can do your work, right? I mean, these are the kind of opportunities that we couldn't have even fathomed when we were going through our
Oh yeah.
educational programs. And I feel like the students are so lucky. Similarly, our military students, they all have full-time jobs. They're all working. Most of them have families. So they can do this on nights and weekends. If they're up at 3 a.m., if it's a different time zone somewhere across the world, none of that matters. It doesn't stop their educational pursuits. And that's what I really love about working at this institution.
Yeah, and just to jump in there, Pod, I hear you and I agree with you. I mean, with us being 90% athletes in my program, and I only have 80 students, but it's just me. So we try to offer that flexibility too. We have all hybrid classes because we
Yeah.
wanted to give some of that time back in a flexible way to cater to, and we don't have class on Fridays. So that kind of, leads itself into helping student athletes balance everything and then also
Yes.
maybe find time, hopefully, for that internship. And to speak, it's not clean within our curriculum, within our major to do micro internships, but we still make it work. As the internship coordinator, I can manually just say, all right, you're going to go work 8 events. Those all count. We'll add them all
Yes.
together. It doesn't have to be one manager, 180 hours, whatever it might be. So yeah, it's 100% the way to go for some people. And it's a lot easier sometimes to piece it together than it was to just get that one really, really cool internship. And we all know how competitive those are anyway.
Yeah.
So great. So moving on to now that we know a lot more about APU and AP or AMU as well, I'd love to hear about your new, or at least I think it's brand new, right? Brand new?
It's relatively new, a couple years
Okay,
old.
relatively new. But now a esports major, and like we discussed previously, there's certificates, there are minors, there are very few majors. And so I'd love to hear more. Give us your sales pitch for the esports major. I'm sure you've done this 100 times with all the people you
Absolutely.
answer to, so I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. So we did create a full esports major. This is a bachelor's degree program. We don't currently offer a master's at this time, but that might be coming down the road. So keep your eyes out for that. When we were looking at this, exactly what you said, Nick, we saw that there were a lot of certificates out there. We saw that there were a lot of minors. And what we were seeing is that a lot of those programs were really pulling from expertise that they already had. Most of them didn't develop their own courses, or they might have 1 or 2 esports specific courses, but they were often pulling from video game design, business, larger sport management, and kind of compiling those into a certificate or into a minor. And when we were looking at this, just like when we created our sport management program, we said, well, what are the skills that someone's going to need to work in the esport field? So we, of course, went out and we spoke with all of the esport folks that we know and really kind of picked their brains to see what are the most important topics that students need to have the know-how for when they get out into the industry. And from there, we were super lucky that we had institutional approval to build out all of the courses in our esport program. So all of the courses in our major concentration are specific esport courses. They don't come from other departments. They don't come from elsewhere. We specifically built them with esport in mind. Now, what's really cool about that is that it really prepares students to go into this industry, which doesn't have a lot of structure, and make their mark almost immediately. As you know, the governing bodies in esports have been shifting. We've seen actually a number of lawsuits because there's no structure and there's really no safeguards for a lot of these athletes. So we wanted to be sure that we were preparing students to get in there and to kind of take that managerial role right away. In doing so, we do require an externship in that degree program. That's something we don't require in our sport management program, but esports we do. And the reason for that is because this field is relatively new in the US at least, and it's growing really quickly. So it's not something where we can provide tons and tons of case studies or, other types of applied experiences in the classroom because things are changing so rapidly. And for that reason, it's so important that the students get out there, get in the field, and really experience what's happening in the area that they're interested in. So our eSport degree program was created, and the reason that we wanted it to be a full degree program was because we wanted to set students up for that managerial position, but we also wanted to legitimize this for the folks that might be influencing student decisions, right? Parents. If you tell your parents, cool, I want to go get a certificate in esport, that's fine. They don't care because you're still getting whatever, a business degree or a sport management degree, something that already is a little bit more legitimate. When you're talking about video games as a potential career field, parents get scared, and rightly so. But there's tons of money to be made in this industry. And if we have a formalized degree program, that legitimizes this space, right? They're getting a bachelor's degree just like anybody else pursuing a bachelor's degree. And that not only makes the parents happy, but also makes the students more marketable as they come out.
Yeah, and I'm as I'm scrolling through the curriculum, like I can see that, yeah, 100%. You know, where some programs like mine would have an event and facility management, you have one specific to esports, and there's definitely overlap, but there are definitely things that are super unique to an esports event that we do not cover in detail in our other classes. So I respect that you didn't just borrow or copy and paste. I also love the concentrations. So as you know, the industry coaching is a big part of that. And having an esports coaching and athlete development concentration has to be a one of one, if not one of like a handful of programs in the world. So I think that's incredible. And it leads into your model too, because as you already know this, esports is massive in Europe.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of your students probably are at the moment, or at least a good bit of them. And then it's growing here as well, and we're figuring it out. And in the U.S., just like, you know, it's almost like soccer. We're still figuring it out in the U.S., but Europe's
Yes, exactly.
got the handle on that 100%. So this is really cool. So I guess a follow-up question to all of this is, there's got to be a limited number of people in the world that know these things in detail. So how hard has it been to identify and find faculty for these very specific courses?
Yeah, Nick, it's a great question, and it has really been a challenge. We have one full-time faculty in the esports program. Our esports program has about 100 students, so it's smaller than our sport management side, but still a good size. So we have one full-time faculty member, Craig Skilling, on that side of the house, and then we have 7 adjuncts that teach on the esports side. It has been incredibly difficult to fill those roles. First, from the educational standpoint, right? There's not a lot of people that have had, 18 credits in esport or whatever the case may be to meet those minimum qualifications. So we have had to open that up a little bit, business, sport management, and then if they have esport industry experience, that's great. But what we have found is an additional challenge is that a lot of folks that are working full time in esports simply don't have the time to serve as adjuncts. A lot of these spaces are a little bit bootstrappy. They're young organizations, or they're organizations that have less support than some more traditional or more formalized organizations. And as a result, they're putting in lots of hours. They're doing that kind of entrepreneurial grind, and they don't have the time and the space to serve as adjuncts. So we've had a number of great folks that have been with us for short stints, and then they say, we can't continue this role because it's just too much of a time conflict. And then in the interview process, we've also had a number of folks who have, one time played an esport and thought that they could teach this in this degree program or things of the like, which of course they cannot. So really whittling down that pool and finding people that are highly qualified in this area has been difficult. That said, we have found some great folks. We have one person in particular who is on the mental health and kind of athlete development side in esport, which is, like you said, pretty rare at this point to have somebody specialized in that area. He's awesome. We have someone on the other side of the house, which is much more broadcasting. He's awesome. So we've been able to put those pieces together, but it is not without a lot of effort, as you've alluded to, Nick.
Yeah, two things. So Umar Hussein and I are nearly finished with our esports mental health study. So I'll
Yes,
be
I
happy
love
to
it.
share that with you once it's
Please do.
done.
We'll put it into one of our courses.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope we find something relevant for you. And then two, were you able to at least, I assume with the online nature of your programs that if it's anything like ACU where Brandon is, or a couple of schools I've worked at, were you able to find good SMEs to kind of build these courses out so that people maybe with a little bit less experience can pick them up and run with them?
Yeah, we have found really good folks to build these courses. Craig, who is our program coordinator, has built a number of them, and then we brought in some great SMEs to build the others. We just revamped two of our courses with great external SMEs that came in to build those as well. And actually, it's pretty funny as folks have gone through that course building process. I would say 75% of them have then said, well, hey, can I teach this course? Like, I really love it, and I feel passionate about the content that I've just created. So that's actually helped us pull in some really good adjuncts as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to build a course and not have that itch to say, well, I mean, I've already done all the work. No one knows it
Right.
better than me, so why don't I just go ahead and teach this for you? So I've definitely felt that as well in the past. Pod, do you have any questions about the esports program? I know you're kind of in the same online field right now.
Yeah, I just kind of find it fascinating because you talked about the difficulty hiring adjuncts, and wow, I understand that 18 credit hours. Well, maybe in a bachelor's program, I find it a little bit easier because we can find a little bit more breadth. But
Yes,
in a
exactly.
master's program like sport management, trying to find people with a PhD sometimes want to come in an adjunct can be difficult. But I am interested in looking at the courses for esports. How were
Sure.
you able to find textbooks or resources for all these things as you're developing the classes, just because it's such a brand new field?
Yeah, that's a great question. Dina Gentile just came out with a new esports book. And we are working to get that into some of our classes at this point. But prior to that, when we built this program about 2.5 years ago, there wasn't really a good esports textbook. And so it's built upon open educational resources.
Hmm.
And we got really lucky that we had great SMEs that were bringing in those resources and were able to pull from their experiences as they built this course. But there is really no textbook. And at the time it was built, there definitely was no textbook. So it's definitely not built upon the structure of a traditional textbook.
So
Yeah,
when
and there
you were
certainly isn't one for each topic. Like
Yes,
they're like
right.
it's like an intro book. It might scratch a little bit at each one of
The
these
surface,
courses,
yeah, but
but
it's not
yeah,
going in depth. Exactly.
yeah, you can't rely on it for 8 to 16 weeks.
No.
So I'm interested as you brought this to your academic council for approval. Were there maybe some sideways glances or some questions from other faculty like, is
So
this
this
actually going to
program came
stick?
online before I was this program came online before I was at APU, but
So it was a
Okay.
directive.
the stories that I've heard are actually that it was really highly supported. It
Okay.
was not a
Good.
directive to build a program, but it was one of those pieces where this was a seemingly natural extension of the sport management program. This was another silo of sport management that we could
Yep.
see great opportunity in. And I'm not sure if you're familiar, but all of the military branches have esports teams and they're highly competitive. So that's actually where the idea came from is all of these esports teams within the military branches. We knew there was an interest in esport and we thought, could we tap into that potential interest with this esports program? So, of course, there were some sideways glances. Of course, there were some people that said, how do you build a whole degree based on video games? But at least from the stories that I've heard, it was relatively supported all the way through.
I think there's some
It's so funny you
carryover
mentioned that.
to what they do to what they do in the military, because with everything they're doing as far as like operating drones and so many kind of remote types of things, and I know it's not the same thing. I mean, we can
Of course.
stipulate that, but I mean, I think it's a natural fit. Yeah.
Well, and you can tell just, when we talk about sports marketing, right? We can tell who the demographic is with some of these commercials and things. The military knows what they're doing, going after people that play these military style games.
Yep.
But it's so funny you mentioned that, Brittany, because I know Pod won't relate to this, but like I watch esports streamers quite often. And just the other day, one of the streamers was just playing and was randomly partnered up with this person who is on the Goats and Glory team, which is the Navy esports team. Pod.
That's
And
awesome.
they were asking him questions. He's like, so wait, do you just play video games for the military? He goes, basically for the next 3 years I play, I do all my basic stuff, but I play video games for the military, and it's like a marketing
At the academy?
thing.
He's at the academy?
No, like
Or
he's fully enlisted in the
wow,
Navy.
cool.
And yeah, exactly. So like it's a marketing expense at that point too, to have these people go out there. I mean, you can spare 10 guys to go out, or ladies or gentlemen to go out and
Sure.
play esports, and it's great marketing. And who would have thought? Who would have thought we'd be here 10 years ago with an esports major? Who would
Yes,
have thought
exactly.
that esports would be an extension of sports management, or at least that's the most logical way to group this for so many universities? Like they can't figure out where else to put it. We
Yes.
do have a lot of overlapping content. Like you said, there are people that do overlap a lot, or as you've done it, completely built your own path. But who would have thought here we are, right? With esports being an extension of sport management.
Definitely when I was pursuing my degree, there were no esport concentrations, there were no esport majors, there were no certificates. I don't think we even mentioned it in a single class as I was going through my sport management degree programs. So, we've definitely come a long way.
Absolutely. Pod, any more questions about the esports program?
Probably not about esports because it's just going to show my ignorance. However, I'm fully supportive of it because, to your point, it's an extension of what we do on the sport management side. And I think sometimes we kind of get wrapped up on, are they athletes? Are they not athletes? That doesn't really matter. As I think about my students and where can I place you for jobs, this is a, multi-billion dollar industry that's global.
Exactly.
So there's so many opportunities there. I mean, it's really cool to see schools start to expand on this. I'll be careful. There was a former administrator at a place that I've worked at before who really wanted to push this. And at first I'm like, yeah, and this is probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I'm like, I don't know. I just don't see a market. I'm completely wrong.
I
Completely.
think COVID threw gasoline on this fire
100%.
because people were at home, and who's the only professional athlete you could watch?
Yep.
It was streamers. It was people that didn't need to be in a specific place to compete. So, and we talk about that all the time with accessibility and broadcasting and all these things, that this is the one thing where, you can be a casual person, just an average Joe, and go online, and all of a sudden you're playing with professional athletes. You can't do that in the NBA or the
No.
NFL. So let's just hope that the market doesn't get oversaturated,
Right.
and we have a billion of these programs all trying to do the same thing. And I wish you nothing but success with the esports program. It's very cool. And
Thank
let's give
you.
a quick shout out to Cosma for the special accreditation that you've received. So that was
Absolutely.
very cool. Do you want to mention anything about that real quick? What kind of the process was? Because you are the first.
Yes. I would love to mention some stuff about Cosmo, but before we get there, I wanted to chat about the online athletic departments, which is something that we've been pondering a lot. And I wanted to hear your
Ooh,
guys' thoughts on this. We
okay.
don't have an athletic department at American Public University or American Military University because we're 100% online. So we don't have those physical campuses where we can have a football stadium or a soccer field. Um, but we would or are considering bringing our esport program into a more formal collegiate athletic setting. We have teams competing on the collegiate side with the NECC, but right now they're relatively informal in that they don't have a paid head coach and things like that. So this is something that we've been pondering a lot: is how do we formalize and stand up an athletic department, really starting with our esports program. So have you
I
guys
think it's an I
heard
think it's an
anything about
incredible
online
idea,
athletic
but
departments or thought about those things?
I mean, I don't even know if we call it a department, because it's
Right.
one sport. I mean, you need a manager, you need a coach, maybe
Yep.
you do need administrative help, but like, my only question is, and this is me with ignorance to the logistics of this, as I understand it now, teams will be in one spot playing teams in another spot, and the teams are still in the same room. For you, obviously, that is a question of, are we allowed to have 5 different people log in from wherever they are in the world to participate as a team? I mean, I'm sure that it can be done.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
think
it comes with its own logistical issues of internet
yes,
connections and
that.
and stuff of that nature. But that's somebody far more advanced than me needs to be answering that question. But that would be my only concern, really. Like the rest of it is, I think it'd be great for student life and retention to have a team to be a part of. You could probably have half a dozen you could probably have your own league just within your system
Yeah.
because you
On
have
our
so
club
many
side, we
students
have
involved
we
with
have about
this.
600 students in our esports club. So
Wow.
even if we could leverage a handful of those folks onto the more competitive collegiate side, we would be
I
we could
I
be
think you
cruising.
should pursue something like that. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know if it'll, I can't say NCAA, but I don't know if it'll be part of the collegiate esports. I mean, you can have your own tournaments just within your, you have a lot of capital there, human capital
True,
there.
true.
So,
And I mean,
uh,
it's not governed by the NCAA, but
no,
Correct.
no,
if
no.
we use that as a model, I mean, there are so many doggone athletes right now, student athletes right now, who are taking online classes.
Yep.
I mean, you'll never see them in a residential class, maybe one or two if they have to, but I think there's already a model there,
Well,
or
and
at
they do
least a
have a governing
justification.
body, there
Yeah,
it's they do have NACE. So like there are rules and regulations and things in place, and there's
Absolutely.
you have to choose which one you want to be a part of. There's a little bit more choice than we have.
Yes.
An esports team can just choose whichever level it wants to play at and whichever which sports it wants to play at with very few regulations. But I think it's a great idea, especially for your situation that you're in and any other completely online school. Like that's a great way to kind of increase that part of the campus without actually having, like you said, to break ground or have
Right.
you don't even need an esports
Build
lab
million-dollar
because
stadiums.
yeah, you just maybe send out some really cool jerseys to the students on the team, and boom, make sure everybody's technology is up to stuff. But yeah, I think it'd be a very interesting concept.
hmm
Cool. Thanks for chatting that through with me. It's something that we've been exploring internally, and we haven't seen much talk about it in the wider kind of sport management or esport field. So it's always great to chat with folks about it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll chat for a second after this, but I'll do a quick outro and just say thank you so much for your time, Brittany. It's always great to learn what other people are going through on other campuses, and I know a lot of us are faced with these questions. Me from marketing all the time, like, should we add esports as a major and
Right.
minor? And I said, I'm very comfortable with it as a certificate for now.
Sure.
Let's get interested people into that before we start to think bigger. But
Right.
I,
Create the
I just
pathway.
love exactly. I love hearing about how other people are doing it so that I'm more informed when I get asked. I actually said if you wait a week, there'll be a podcast all about this,
There you go.
and then you can hear what they've gone through to make this happen. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's been great to be here. And if anybody has any questions about esport or wants to chat further about our programs, I'm more than welcome to field those questions.
Perfect. And we
Thank
will
you.
include your contact info in the description for this week's episode.
Perfect.
Until the next episode, enjoy finals, everybody, and enjoy graduation as well.